Hello everybody, I'm Roxy, this is Rock'n'Vias, and today I bring you my June wrap-up part 1. Yes, you heard correctly, I am doing 2 parts this month, and possibly / probably most months as well. Not only because I'm reading more, but just the books that I have been reading are so good and grant a bit more discussion. I could make longer videos, but I just don't feel like it. And editing longer videos just seems daunting to me. Also, I feel like I haven't been editing my ramblings as much, which I've been enjoying. I don't know about you. Please let me know in the comments down below. But I feel like it's nice when I tell you a little bit about what's going on in that crazy head of mine. Okay, let's get on with the books. I am talking in this wrap-up about classics plus 2 that aren't really classics but definitely should be. So let's start with this giant of a novel called Anna Karenina, which has started a whole Russian lit obsession. You can read all about it in my blog. I will link the Anna Karenina entry there, but also my TBR of sorts and what books I've been buying, I'm planning to read, might buy, etc. Please feel free to tell me about books. I might not buy them right away because I really do need to read my own damn books, but I definitely will keep them in mind. So Anna Karenina was fantastic. It really is as good as everyone says. It's just such a high quality soap opera. You just feel for every character, and every character kind of gets on your nerves a little bit, but at the same time you see what they are feeling and you understand where they are coming from, even if it is like very dramatic. Tolstoy does such a great job at creating this tension and all these social cues. There is this scene in particular where people are looking at two people talking and they make all these conclusions, and so you're sort of primed to see it through their eyes when the narration does get to those characters and what they are thinking and feeling. It's amazing. This was translated by Constance Garnett, who was a Victorian translator superstar. I discovered her through Anna Karenina and I'm so happy I did. Her translation has been contested. They say she made mistakes and also she put too much of herself into her translations. Fair enough. I will read another translation when I reread this, but she also has her supporters and I do see why. The voice she crafts here is masterful. Again, that tension that I've always been hearing about in Tolstoy. Also, it is largely thanks to Constance Garnett, who translated so many different authors like Dostoevsky and Tolstoy and Chekhov, that we have so much access to Russian literature because she was like an OG champion and translator of Russian literature. Go Google her because she's amazing. Now, if you don't know what Anna Karenina is about, don't worry, I gotcha. Depending on how you look at it, about one family or 3 families that are all interconnected. It starts off with Stefan, I think it's his name. You know, they have many names, so always pay attention to that. So Stefan has cheated on his wife, and so they are going through a rough patch, but he is longing for her to forgive him. Anna Karenina is coming to visit them. Then there's Kitty, who is a young woman torn between 2 suitors, and she really admires Anna and she really wants to be her friend. She really feels that sort of young woman desire in terms of admiration, and it's so amazingly handled. Anna and one of the suitors fall in love, except Anna is married to an older guy. They got married when Anna was very young, and he's not the most romantic of husbands, and he's actually very reasonable. You know, he still loves Anna and he still wants the best for her, but Anna is very young and is feeling these romantic emotions that she's never felt before that kind of mirror Kitty. And so we see how these 3 storylines play out. The chapters are so short, and after the beginning they start to organize as parallel stories, and you see the parallels, the counterpoints and the mirrors and how they differ and all the personalities, and it's just so great. It really is worth your time. It really is worth the thinking of 800 pages. I binged like the 3 or 4 first parts. Like, I couldn't read any other type of fiction because I was so into this. Oh, it was so good. I will be reading War and Peace later this year. I don't know when yet, but it will be her translation, and then when I reread those pieces I will seek more modern translations. But I just really admire Constance Garnett. she's a queen. Okay, then I picked up something that wasn't on my TBR. Sappho, Come Closer. This little penguin black classic edition of Sappho's poetry. In case you don't know, Sappho was a female poet who wrote about the island of Lesbos. That's where the word lesbianism comes from, and she's like the first lesbian icon. I marked the desire and death longing because I thought that was super strong, but I need notes. This had too many references that went over my head, and yes, I could have Googled them, but I knew that I need notes that are in the context of her poetry. It's not necessary to enjoy the lyricism, but it gets to a point where the imagery is so essential to the makeup of the poem that I really couldn't connect with it that much. I do think that is my problem, and I would want to check out a more annotated version. These are not annotated at all, which is fair. I like these editions for what they are, but yeah, I will revisit Sappho with a bit more notes and a bit more context because I was a bit lost. Continuing on with the lesbian theme, which is a great sentence, however you look at it, I read Nightwood by Djuna Barnes. This was a really strange book, first of all, but not strange in a way that I think we would call it experimental nowadays. This was, by the way, introduced by T.S. Eliot, who had some great insights into the book. He was a great admirer of Djuna Barnes and this novel in particular. But also it had a preface by Janet Winterson. Having read only one of her novels, Written on the Body, which I really enjoyed, I can see the influence there. Those were really good. I read them after the book and it was totally the right way to go. So the book, I didn't love it as much as I expected to. It is a bit as if Mrs. Dalloway or like Virginia Woolf in general met Against Nature by Usman. Something very purple prosed meets modernist techniques. It's not difficult to read or to understand what the author means. Okay, let's start with what it's about and then a little bit more on how the plot moves. Starts with Felix, who will be one of the main characters, being born. It goes a bit into his mom, who dies at birth. This is all first chapter. And then we see Felix grow, meet this really crazy doctor who he first meets in drag. The doctor was in drag. Then you meet Robin, and then the book is about Robin because Robin is a womanizer. She has a bunch of affairs, and then you go back to the doctor and it sort of stays there. Other things happen, but that is kind of the skeleton. So it doesn't really have a protagonist. That's what's interesting about it. It moves. I think it's not that fully realized. I understand why it was so innovative because, of course, of the themes of gender and sexuality. Robin likes women, and the problem with that is that she breaks hearts. Not exactly that she loves women, but the characters feel like caricatures. It feels rushed, that's the truth. Maybe it's because the whole thing is a bit fever dreamish. I do like books that feel fever dreamish, like Fever Dream by Samantha Schweblin, but this one feels unpolished. That's the word. It feels like there's so much potential. Maybe this is just the 100 years hindsight talking. Maybe this was perfect for when it came out and what it did, but I do feel like there are some screws that are loose to the point. At the same time, that makes it feel more relaxed and more like a game. You shouldn't take any of these characters too seriously. There are too many Dr. Matthew monologues. I understand the point, and monologues are a big part of the modernist ethos. That's fine, but I think in this case it took away from what could have been both more succinct but also more expanded. I really did enjoy it. I think I need to reread it. It's a really hard book to discuss. I think it's an interesting book. I don't think it's like the best novel I've ever read. I don't think it's a bad book by any means. So yeah, check it out. And if you do check it out, please let me know what you think, because it's a book that really warrants discussion. I really hope I get to study it at one point in my life. That's part of the modernist, again, agenda to like just get you to think about books intellectually. So that worked. Especially at the beginning, I was really into Felix and Robin and how that subjectivity moved. That part I really appreciated. So yeah, that was Nightwood by Djuna Barnes. Then a book that sadly was disappointing, and I'm sad that it was disappointing. It was not terrible, but it was bit of a disappointment, and that was Passing by Nella Larsen. I was so looking forward to this because it examines the concept of passing, which is, being able to look white when you are either mixed race or you are from a different race, and that gives you a whole lot of privilege. And this is still during segregation. It was first published in 1929. It also explores female rivalry and friendship and desire, so that was super interesting. And it had been compared by a lot of people actually, but especially by the hosts of novel pairings as like a great companion or even like superior to The Great Gatsby. And since I believe The Great Gatsby is one of the best pieces of literature ever written, I was very, very eager. However, with such high expectations, this was bound to disappoint. I should know better than to hype books up. This is really interesting. It's the kind of book that if I tell you what it is about, you will think this is a great book. Because it's about these two frenemies. They were never really friends, who are black, but both can pass as white. One of them is rich and one of them was poor. So there is a class element there that I think goes completely unexplored after the first part. One of them, Claire, Claire passes completely and she pretends to be white. She gets married to a racist, basically with the goal to ascend in social stature. She always felt an outsider in her group because she was poor. Then there is Irene, who can also pass and does so when it suits her. So if she wants to go to an afternoon tea place where she cannot go in because she's black, she pretends to be white. So that's also very interesting. But she is part of the Harlem Renaissance, upper class New Yorkers actually. And Claire, even though she is married to a fairly wealthy white man, is not part of that. So you can say that Irene in those terms is more accomplished socially, which is the only thing that Claire wants. They ran into each other in Chicago at first. Things become messy. Again, this is very interesting in its themes, but the writing style is just average. The characters are very one-dimensional. The tension comes from the themes, and that's always cool, but it doesn't come from the characters themselves. It's not in the writing, if that makes any sense. The symbolism is very heavy-handed. It doesn't really add in a way. I think the structure is clumsy and the ending was so dramatic in a way that doesn't really work. I know all these classics tend to be overly dramatic because it's actually our contemporary sensibilities, but then again, when I read classics that I love, it does feel like the drama is so earned. And in this case, it was just very abrupt and ridiculous in my opinion. So I know a lot of people love this book. I'm sorry, but I just didn't like it. I would reread it, especially because I read the intro again after reading the book, and the intro was so fascinating. Thematically is so impressive, and I love that the women here are very flawed and very strong and very confused as well. I like all of that. It's just I wanted it to be better written, I guess. Okay, one last official classic, The Nose by Nikola Gogol. This is translated by, Ronald Wilks. This was actually a very fortunate finding because when I did my reading rush TBR, link down below as always, I picked up all those little books and realized I had this one that I forgot because, there are 80 books in the box set, so it's hard to remember them all. This is number 46. It contains 2 short stories, The Nose and the Carriage. I not only wanted to read it immediately because I'm so into Russian literature right now, but also because I've been watching the Met Opera night streams. Not every single night, I don't have the time, but they showed Shostakovich's The Nose, which is something that is almost never performed because it's bonkers. Yeah, I really wanted to read the short story first, and I was really happy that I got to do it. I think I understood the opera better because I had read the short story. This is about an officer who wakes up one day and realizes his nose is gone. Then one day he sees it walking, leading a life, and he's like, WTF, you're my nose, come back. I am not shitting you, that's what this story's about. It's actually not, but that's what happens. It's so well done. It's surrealist and hilarious and absurdist, but it has this sinister tint because it talks about disappearances and bureaucracy, and it's just I really, really loved it. The Carriage was also good, but it was not as good as The Nose. It's also about officials and purchase of a carriage. It's kind of like The Emperor Has No Clothes sort of situation. It's also really good, but The Nose was just spectacular. And if this is a preview of Dead Souls, oh my god, I know I'm just going to love it. Which is funny because I just said I shouldn't hype up books too much because disappointment, and that's what I'm doing. But anyways, 2 books that are contemporary classics in my heart, okay, are the graphic novels Fun Home and Are You My Mother by Alison Bechdel. I reviewed these together for my blog, so I link those down below. So let's start with Fun Home, which was a reread. And if I've ever had to make a case for rereading, Fun Home would be it. I read this 4 years ago and I liked it. I thought it was smart, but it didn't click with me. I thought the pacing was off. This time around, I loved it. I thought the pacing was actually a great opportunity for introspection and it served the structure well. Maybe because I wasn't so well acquainted with memoirs, or because I wasn't so much into that self-dissecting style and drawing literary parallels, because why not? I just couldn't appreciate it to the level that I did now. So this is about Alison Bechdel's relationship with her father, and she grew up in a family that was very strange. They ran a funeral home, that's why it's called Fun Home. And her father was at least bisexual. That's a point they touch in the book, whether he was bisexual or gay, but in any case, he liked men and he had a bunch of affairs with underage kids. And the main point of the book is that she's doing this after her father's death, which may or may have not been a suicide. It's just so smart. It's also funny. It has this very like deadpan humor. It's really, really good. Check it out. I really love the art style also. I know a lot of people don't gel with this kind of cartoonish style, but I love me a more cartoonish style for nonfiction, especially where the palette is muted but purposeful. I really, really like this. And then the sequel to that, Are You My Mother, which is quite a chunker compared to Fun Home if you think about it. It's because Are You My Mother is not only about Bechdel's relationship to her mother, but also how she's writing Fun Home and how she's having problems writing Fun Home. Also, she plans to write this one next, and she's going through therapy twice. First, right after college, and then in the now when she's writing Fun Home. In this one, she really, more than literature, she delves into psychoanalysis. The author herself became very interested in it. It's just so fascinating. I know why more people prefer Fun Home to this. Fun Home is much more of a story. Bechdel coming out, growing up with her dad and her dad's life as she pieces it together. This one is much more stagnant in a way, but I connected to it so much. I think both of these are strong, and objectively speaking, Fun Home might be stronger, but Are You My Mother resonated with me in a way that I didn't expect. What I will say though is that don't read this back to back. I was going to do that, but then I paused because they are meant in a way as standalones. Like you can totally read this without having read Fun Home. It repeats a lot of things, especially at the beginning where she's kind of introducing herself to the reader. She touches upon a lot of things that she's already gone into so much depth in Fun Home that you're kind of like, okay, I know this, let's move on. So space them out a bit, but yeah, so good. Give them a chance if this is your jam, because that was it. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. Please subscribe and comment. Have you read any of these books? Are you interested in reading them? Remember, you can always reach out to me on Twitter and Instagram. I really like discussing books, and yeah, that's it. See you next time for part 2.